All right. So you remember how, as part of what Sixtus V, the Pope, did during the Counter Reformation was some city planning in Rome to make the whole city less kind of windy and difficult to navigate. So we get these wide, straight avenues that make it easier for people to get around the city and specifically to visit important churches. So here we have San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane, which is located at the intersection of two of these big avenues. And at the intersection of two of these big avenues, um, they put in four fountains. So one fountain on every corner. Hence, that's why this church is called San Carlo alle Quattro Fontane. So, of the four fountains, Saint Carlo of the four fountains. And so this is commissioned by a group of Trinitarian monks. They have Borromini build it. It's dedicated to the former, so he had died, Archbishop of Milan, who was one of the main guys behind the Council of Trent. And if we remember, the Council of Trent was when the Catholic Church was trying to, it was really the architecture of the Counter Reformation, sort of thinking about how do we deal with the Protestant Reformation, and this is what we're going to do. So that's who it's dedicated to. So who is Borromini? So Borromini is born into a family of stonemasons. He comes to Rome in 1619. He works in his uncle's workshop. His uncle is an architect. Later on, he works under Bernini, while Bernini is doing all of his designing and building of St. Peter's. San Carlo is Borromini's first independent commission. So it's his first church that he does all on his own. And he doesn't see it out to its end. He dies before this church is completed, in part because Borromini was always sort of a very depressed person, unlike Bernini, who was a very jolly guy, and never felt like he was achieving the level of success that he wanted to achieve. And he actually kills himself at the age of 68. So this church, he never even finishes it. But they do use, the builders go on and use his plans and his design to complete it. So it is still his vision. They didn't just have somebody else come on in and change around stuff. So let's take a look at what we're looking at. So remember, we said this is at the corner of these two big avenues that have fountains on each side, and we can see one of the fountains right here. So the space is it's a really, the Trinitarian monks, they get this really small space for where they want to build this church. So the architect, Borromini, has to deal with some sort of kind of irregularities with the space. So first of all, it's got a cut off corner because of this fountain. So you can see there's the fountain there, and you can see how the corner is cut off here in the plan. Because of the irregular site, we can't do a nice circle central plan. So instead, we've got this kind of elongated central plan church, which has an oval dome. We'll look at that in a moment. Inside, we've got these big columns that support a really large entablature. And then we've got an oval dome. I'm going to show you the dome more closely on the next slide, that's supported on pendentives. All right, so let's take a closer look at the dome. So you can see the dome has these coffers, but the coffers are a combination of, we've got some hexagons, we've got octagons, and we've got crosses. And these decrease in size as we move up the dome. And then we get up here to the top of the dome over here, and we get a dove of the Holy Spirit inside a triangle. And this triangle is really important because, remember, this church was commissioned by Trinitarian monks. So Trinitarian, the Trinity of the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So that's why we've got a little triangle at the top of our dome over here. The dome is lit to look like it's got kind of, so there would be what's called, you can see it a little better here, over here. There's a lantern up on top of the church. That's what this structure is called up here. That would let light in. So we've got some light coming in from the top and light coming in from the sides of the dome that make it look like it's sort of shimmering or floating, or almost like moving and expanding in space. Then we've got, let's take a look at the facade of the church, which was completed after Borromini died. It's got this undulating front that's also, right, if we look at the interior, also has this kind of undulating quality, wavy sort of a quality here. We got lots of sculpture on the outside here with these big, big columns, very, very big columns. Large columns. We've got some concave niches where we can put sculptures. We've got some convex niches where we can put sculpture. So we get a lot of light and shadow and contrast and drama. You see where I'm going. This is very Baroque. This whole thing is very Baroque. We've got this strong vertical through the center of the church facade with this tall doorway. Then we've got a statue in a niche up here. Then our eye goes up. We've got a window that's got a little canopy over that. And then we've got these two angels struggling to hold up this enormous cartouche that busts through up through you can see it better over here, the balustrade at the top of our church. So we really get this kind of strong vertical thrust of the church taking us up and cutting through the horizontals. So you can sort of look at this and be like, wow, this is very Baroque. In terms of the influence, Borromini is doing something very different than, say, like the churches that we see built by Brunelleschi in the Renaissance, right? So why is this so Baroque? Because he is getting ever more complex with the geometry of the plan, right? If you look at it here, we've got these two triangles in the plan, and then we can have them enclose two perfect circles, and then yet more triangles for the niches around the interior of the church. So he gets really criticized for this plan. Like, it's not, at first glance, it doesn't look like the perfect geometry of a classical form, but and that it ignores classical Vitruvian architectural theory. But actually, Borromini is doing this thing where he thinks about the principles of geometry underlying architectural theory to make it fit into this really oddly shaped site. And he's not just doing this thing that we see in a lot of classically inspired architecture of the time, where he's just kind of plonking on columns and pediments and other classical stuff like a bunch of Lego blocks to make it look like a church exterior. Instead, he's really thinking about, how can I use the principles of geography to fit into this sort of oddly shaped space? If we look at it, he might have been influenced by Hellenistic architecture. If you kind of look at this, it sort of almost looks like the treasury at Petra, but he had never been to Petra. So it's unlikely that it's a specific reference to Petra, but maybe there was something still standing in Rome at the time when Borromini was still alive that's no longer standing now today, that he may have been influenced by, that was from the Hellenistic period. This style then, Borromini, it's not popular in Rome itself. Rome is so super obsessed with its classical, Roman history, but this way that he introduced Baroque architectural principles to the church plan becomes really popular in northern Italy and beyond. So there you go. That's our Borromini. I also threw a little video up on Canvas for you to look at if you want to see what the interior space looks like in video form, not just in terms of images like this. All right. Good luck. Email me if you have any questions.